Welcome to the NCIA's Voice of Cannabis. Join hosts Aaron Smith and Jimmy Young as they dive into the pulse of the cannabis industry, featuring weekly guests who break down big topics like standardization, evolving regulations, and exclusive member spotlights. Get informed, get inspired. And now, here are your hosts, Aaron and Jimmy.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the NCIA's Voice of Cannabis podcast for this week. I'm PCM TV founder Jimmy Young, and I want to also say thank you to our supporting sponsors, including Buds Group out of New Jersey and New York. That's a group of consultants headed up by an old friend of mine named BeneLeaves. And also the Maverick PR Group out of Denver, Colorado is also a big supporter of this entity and our cause here at Pro Cannabis Media. And I'm so happy to be joined, as usual, by the Executive Director of the National Cannabis Industry Association, Aaron Smith. Aaron?
Great to be here as always. And one of the most important things that I think that this podcast really serves to do is highlight some of the great members of the NCIA community. And today we have Emelie Ramach, who is the Vice President of Business and Government Affairs at leading cannabis manufacturer BeneLeaves in Ohio. And Emelie is a good friend of NCIA, has been engaged with our committees and has been to multiple lobby days. And also, I think what we're here to talk about today is really at the leading edge of adult use in the Buckeye State. So Emelie, tell us just a little bit about yourself and BeneLeaves and what brought you to this cause.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. Ohio has been a very interesting state since day one. I actually started off in activism, holding a sign down at the State House that said "Free the Plant" many, many years ago, which kind of catapulted me into the nonprofit world. So I started my nonprofit, Compassion Alternatives, and we had a educational wing. And, we realized at that time, too, that there was a very great financial need for patients to be able to afford their medical marijuana cards. And so I kind of launched that and really just got to know, just the people of Ohio, the patients of Ohio, and, really dove into that space and educating and helping people. And then moved into retail. I opened the first dispensary in Central Ohio in Ohio's medical marijuana program. And that was really fun and a really exciting time for that. It was definitely a learning curve. We're building out the POS systems and the patient systems as people were coming in. So I like to joke with my colleagues that I could write a book just from that week and month of time. From there, I did retail for a few years. And as Aaron mentioned, I'm now vice president with BeneLeaves. We're a manufacturer and processor out of Columbus, Ohio. I'm also a lobbyist here in Ohio as well. It's really advocating for the unheard, the voices, the activists, the consumers and patients of Ohio that, really use this plant as medicine. And so it's just really important to me and just our company that we're fighting to, make sure that this cannabis plant is available to everybody.
And Ohio is quite a state to be working in this industry now, isn't it? Because there always seems to be citizen action and legislative action. And sometimes they don't necessarily agree with each other. In fact, what we've seen in this country over the last few months, even, some of the citizen ballot initiatives have been debunked, if you will, by different state legislators. You guys are going through some changes there in Ohio right now. In fact, being a news guy, the executive producer of Cannabis Coast to Coast News, there is a news story there even this week. They made some changes. They increased the limit of a personal possession. You can have, I believe, now up to 2 ounces, 2.5 ounces, maybe. Is that where we're at right now?
Yeah,
what are some of the other things that are being discussed now at the Ohio State House?
Sure, yeah, and just to preface that, so Ohio passed Issue 2 back in November, which is our adult use initiative, and so the voters passed that overwhelmingly. Throughout the last few months since November, our lawmakers and legislators have since tried to change a lot of the language, to make it more conducive to their own beliefs and how they feel they should structure this type of program. And so what we're really trying to do when we're down there speaking with lawmakers and legislators is that, it's all about education, especially with us at BeneLeaves. We're so close to downtown, so close to the State House that we bring, all of these folks in through tours. And we really use it as an educational moment to be able to have that dialogue and let them know, hey, we're a living, breathing industry. We want to operate and, be able to have safe banking and all of these things that, and basically have parity to all the other existing industries. So since we passed issue 2, there have been several different bills that were kind of floating around. And just recently, Jimmy, as you just mentioned, this week, they had combined all kind of like the outlying bills and just different amendments now back into SB 56, which is kind of like an overall arcing bill that does have some hemp regulations in there as well, which are some things that we're trying to tease out. But as we know too, that's a very delicate topic because we love our local hemp growers, we love our local hemp shops and farmers, and we want them to thrive and be successful. But then collectively we have this commonality that we're fighting against some of this bad stuff and bad product that's showing up in these gas stations and stuff like that, which I know is reflected across the nation as well. And so that's something we're all we have that commonality. And so we're trying to work through that as delicately as we can here in Ohio, in addition to, our lawmakers. I think it's a lot of like nerves, they're worried about, people smoking joints, out on the sidewalk and, certain things like that. And like, really, I think that our main goal right now is to, continually, again, our commonality is to combat the stigma, right? That, cannabis touches everybody, all walks of life, all ages. And so that's just one of the continued talking points and dialogue that we really just try to bring home. But yeah, there are some things that they, opened up for us a little bit more in this sub bill 56. To your point, 2.5 ounces. The grow now has been expanded, I think, back to 12. There's some things too that us as lobbyists and my colleagues are still trying to tease through because it has been new. I mean, the document was 400 pages of legalese. And so a lot of us are still trying to, because it is so new, are still trying to piece through and pull out little parts that we may have missed. But it's not going to be a be all end all. Like there's going to be amendments that are kind of show up after the fact. And so this, honestly, from an operator's standpoint, it's a very neutral bill. I think just working with our lawmakers and activists alike, there has to be some give and take, unfortunately, at this point. And we really feel optimistic that this could potentially be the avenue for that. But we'll see. Like I said, it's a very continued dialogue, but, the general public is upset, justifiably so, because, in Ohio, we voted this and now we're combating and, fighting and trying to educate and do all these things while, even, being more regulated and more restricted. In addition to, we have the Department of Cannabis Coalition, which is our other governing body, which is under Commerce, because it was under Department of Pharmacy under the medical marijuana program. Now it's under Commerce. So essentially we have two governing bodies. We have like the lawmakers and the bills, and then we have the Department of Cannabis Coalition that regulates us operators. And so we're working with them as well on our side, just for more marketing and educational opportunity to be able to have widened guardrails with that as well, because we're still regulated pretty heavily on that side. And so for us, it's been kind of like a twofold conversation where, we want to be able to educate, especially as operators, we know our products the best, seed to sale, full tracking, full traceability. And so for us to be able to educate in that way and at least say, hey, this could potentially help with this ailment, or this could potentially make you feel this way, I think would be incredibly beneficial for all of us.
Well, you guys are really doing everything right. And I think that, I mean, as a cannabis business operator, you're an advocate because we're building a new
Hmm.
industry from the ground up. We've got the headwinds of federal prohibition that we're still fighting. And
Hmm.
I think even maybe even more important than the lobbying work you guys are doing is also just being an exemplar for what responsible cannabis production and distribution
Hmm.
looks like. And that I found that over the years probably moves the dial on getting reluctant policymakers on board more than anything because they see, well, as they see the industry, they realize, well, not only is it not scary, but it's an industry that's employing my nephew or my niece or whatever,
Hmm.
and is giving back to the community and creating, a positive outcomes for communities. So I really appreciate everything you're doing for the industry, and it goes beyond the borders of Ohio. And I think you guys have always been also doing something very important, which is just putting patients first at the center
Hmm.
of what you do since the beginning. And could you speak to just sort of how are things changing with adult use now arriving in Ohio? Has anything changed in your operations or in the way that you approach the business in terms of ensuring that patients continue to be held front and center?
Mhm.
Yeah, of course. And Aaron, you touched on several good points that I want to touch on as well. So the first point you made there was the pathway of entry for employment. And so I think for us too, within our processing facility, I mean, we've employed folks from all walks of life. I've seen some of my employees be able to buy their first house and, put food on the table, single parents, without having these big college degrees. And that's one of the things that I really try to talk about as well, just out in the public, with our lawmakers and saying, hey, like the socioeconomic impact, the pathway to entry for our employees to be able to build careers in this industry is a huge thing. And it's good for all of us to have that type of super diverse workforce. And then in addition to that, touching on the medical marijuana programs also, I think just nationwide and especially here in Ohio, it is so crucial for us to empower those medical programs as well, because we know as an industry, that's what's going to help legitimize that as true cannabis medicine. That hospitals and doctors, I mean, even my primary care physician, he'll say, Emily, like, I so wish that I would be able to, prescribe this like to people and have the data points and data structure to be able to reference to be able to prescribe this, accurate dosing, which we know we need a lot of studies and data and stuff to be able to get to that point. But that is so crucial and so important. And then to touch on your third point, as BeneLeaves, we've always been patient focused. And so from day one, all of our product development and just, our different formulations and ingredients have all been for patient first. We build out our facility to FDA regulations since day one. Totally GMPs, like the full gamut. So, our facility, we know that if the FDA, they're not in our business now, but, soon, eventually, hopefully they will. We know we'd be able to pass that inspection, today. So that was incredibly important for us as well, knowing that we are producing medicine in our facility that's going to medical patients. I think additionally, now that we have moved to adult use, just one of the things that I really try to strive, in all these panels and different podcasts that I do is, it's still continuing to educate that we do have a medical program. It does exist. You can still get your card, and then in addition to that, it's incredibly important to work with your physicians, your primary care provider, let them know, hey, I am taking cannabis as medicine. That's an important educational point as well. So it's very important. But I also feel like too, with the adult use market, Ohio, our qualification list is small in comparison to a lot of other states. And so, in my mind, also, it helps the canna curious, if they end up going to a dispensary, they come across a product that, they're being told and they learn, okay, this could potentially help me with sleep or potentially help me with anxiety. They go and they purchase that product, they take it, then they find out, wow, I'm actually using this to help an ailment. I'm using this as medicine. And so it's a nice pathway for folks that are curious about it to end up learning that, wow, like this is actually, I am using this medically. Um, and so it's really great, then in addition to the adult use, which we all know is fun and great, and the recreational stuff is, a lot of people enjoy that as well, and that's their right to do so. But I do think that from a true medical perspective, it is so important that we really lift up and support these programs.
Yeah, and I'm certainly familiar with one of those tools that you have as a plant medicine. That would be a company I'm
Hmm.
familiar with called Yellow Labs. They have a measured
Hmm.
microdose of THC delivered under your tongue. And
Hmm.
Ohio is one of the biggest markets for this product. And I respect the fact that you look at this plant as a plant medicine. One of the biggest
Hmm.
challenges, I know Aaron and I have talked about this ad nauseum, is accepting this as a plant medicine and not treating it as a drug. And, for
Correct.
many years, we've all talked about it as a drug and sneaking it around and all that stuff. And now it's becoming more legitimate. It's open. You're helping people improve their
Hmm.
lives through responsible consumption of this product.
Hmm.
Different rules in Ohio, just like Massachusetts, the first East Coast state, which is where I have lived most of my life. And
Hmm.
there are different regulations. When you guys in Ohio went from medical only to adult use, okay, and that happened within the last year. Um,
Hmm.
how many of those regulations changed from where you were with medical over to that adult use? Because I always felt that Arizona got it right. They immediately said, "Oh, you know what? Now the medical facilities can be open for adults." It was like such a no-brainer to me to make that decision. But here
Hmm.
in Massachusetts, they make owners of dispensaries do background checks on the same employee to sell the same product under the same roof. And those are the kind of injustices that really gets me upset. Is that true in Ohio too?
Um, I will have to say that we've definitely had our pressure points and our growing points within our both of our programs. And as I mentioned too, we had adult use that passed, but it really didn't get fully implemented until probably like early spring. Um, and so with that being said, a lot of us had to reapply as operators. We had to get our dual use license. So
Right.
that took a long time. There wasn't, we didn't necessarily have to get a separate badge, but we all had to get rebadged under our new dual use license. And that was across the board. And so for operators to have a dual use, it meant that they could sell adult use products and medical products.
Right.
Um, and so you do have some dispensaries that are opening up and that do exist now that are leaning more into just selling adult use products. Now,
Mhm.
with that being said, we're also still waiting on our regulation on what form factors we will be able to possibly sell that will totally be autonomous from the medical program. And so, some examples of that would be, joints, which in Ohio they're calling them individual dosing amounts. And so we definitely have our own very unique way of naming our certain products. Um, but yeah, so we're still, that's kind of like a hard question to answer because we're still kind of teasing that and working through that from a regulatory standpoint. But, to your question specifically, we did all, as operators, have to get rebadged and have a new license structure under dual use.
There you go. What a shock! A double use. Another fee that had to come out of the pockets of the operators. Go ahead, Aaron. I could go on this subject forever. Go ahead.
No, well, I just kind of, before we wrap up, wanted to sort of shift into, the last time we saw you was in Lobby Days, NCIA's 13th annual Lobby Days in
Mhm.
DC. We presented an award to Congressman Dave Joyce, who is a champion from Ohio, who I think just north of you. We also have
Yeah.
Congressman Stivers, who's another Republican champion in Ohio, and so we're really seeing
Hmm.
bipartisan support on the congressional delegation there in your state specifically. And I guess maybe just, we could wrap up and tell us a little bit about your experience in DC for lobby days and just, how
Hmm.
your advocacy translates into trying to move the dial on the federal level, which as we all know is sort of the end goal here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We love lobby days. I think it's just an incredible experience, and always very positive. And it's a great opportunity too to learn from each other what's going on in different states, what works, what hasn't worked, areas that we can improve. And so the last few years with Lobby Days, it's been really incredible to be able to work on that level to really bring stuff back home and use some of those tactics and talking points and just the confidence as well that I think that I brought back, and my colleagues as well. Just to be able to walk into the meetings and say, yeah, like this is justice. Like we know what we're talking about, or this is an educational opportunity. We deserve this as an industry. We've earned our stripes so far. We've showed at a federal level, we've showed on the state level that, we all know how to play by the rules and we're professionals. And, all we want to do is help people and just create medicine and be a working, breathing industry and have industry parity. So I think one of the main things was definitely the confidence level and being able to really feel empowered in, just your passions and what we're all fighting for.
How many years have you been out now?
This past year was our 4th year.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Could you kind of speak to did you change in attitude over the course of those 4 years?
Yeah, so I think
Perception?
so the first year, I think for our team specifically, it was a little, it's a little nerve-wracking when you're walking into these meetings for the first time and you're down and you're navigating the hill, and it was exciting and nerve-wracking in a good way. It was good nerves, right? You feel like happy and, all the things and all those feelings. But, that first year too there was a lot going on. We were still talking about 280E. And at that point, we were seeing some movement with, safe banking and rescheduling. And, now fast forward over the last, 4 years, it's almost goofy because it's like, we're saying the same things over and over again. And a lot of the things that I like to talk about in my meetings is, what other industry do you have operators like us raising our hands saying, yes, we want to be taxed. We want to take out loans. We want to have payroll and banking and, all of these things and have all of this parity. And so I think we're getting there. A lot of the meetings that I had this most recent time too, they were all very supportive, very bipartisan. So I do feel like the general vibe is shifting in a positive direction. But of course, Lobby Days, I mean, I truly feel like we make such a huge impact. Just going down there, being professionals, having our talking points. Lobby Days have always just been very organized and structured, which has been so amazing. I mean, kudos to Michelle and her whole team as well. I mean, every year we've gone, it's just been very smooth. All the meetings that we get set up with, I mean, it's 2 full days of meetings where, you're back to back and you're working with your colleagues. And this past year, I was the team leader again for our team. And I had some new folks on my team this year. And, just watching them become more confident as the day went on was just an incredible experience. And, at the end of it, they said, okay, we feel really comfortable and, positive and empowered to take this back home. And I actually had someone on my team this year say, you know what, I think I'm going to try and be a lobbyist. Like, I think I'm going to go and get registered and try to see how all this works. So I truly feel like it's positive impact as an industry. And, the more that we all get together, the more we find that we have so much commonality within our businesses and operating and, state to state. And I truly feel like as an industry, if we're just unified in our approach on our commonality, we can really start making some big impact.
Before Aaron gets to plug his next industry mixer, there's an elephant in the room here that we really haven't discussed, and it's hemp, and it's what happened in the past week. And Aaron, you were so articulate in your press release. I am going to ask you, there seems to be some what I would call political shenanigans, where they love to add on little amendments to basic things, like the spending bill is being discussed as we speak, okay? And now there's a group looking to actually federally prohibit THC infused products. not just in each state, but in the entire country. We can't get to legalization, we can't get to decriminalization, but we are very good at prohibiting the rights of people to actually build a business and run a business. This is one of the more frustrating things for me. So, Aaron, why don't you take this second, please, and tell the people what you said in your release and why this is a very scary development in the reform world.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, we've got the big, beautiful budget bill under consideration on the House side right now, and a subcommittee in the House Appropriations Committee, led by Andy Harris, by the way, who's a congressman from Maryland, who has, kind of made cannabis prohibition one of his cause celebs, which I think he's probably the only one left in Congress doing that. He's introduced an amendment or a provision in the bill that would redefine hemp as saying it has to not have any quantifiable amount of THC. So what that means is anything, which it's hard to even say what that means because there's, you can buy cereal at Whole Foods that has some quantifiable amount of THC. Practically the real concern is that it means that we're pushing hemp-derived THC products into the underground market further rather than regulating these products, which is what needs to happen. So, this is trying to hand a big win over to the drug cartels instead of small businesses that should be able to responsibly distribute these products.
So, Emelie, I'm sure you have an opinion on this one too.
Yeah, I mean, just as I mentioned earlier, we're having those same struggles here in Ohio. And what was unfortunate is that when we passed issue 2, it was ironic that we suddenly then had the mushrooming of all these vape shops at the same time. And so the general public, seemingly very confused, thinking that, okay, this is the stuff that we just passed. Like, this is the stuff that this is a legal dispensary. These are the legal products now under issue 2, adult use. And so it's taken a lot of time to kind of undo that, to really educate the public and say, hey, no, these two products are completely separate. As far as just, quality, safety, all of those things, right? And so that's something that has been a big educational point for us. In addition to what Aaron just mentioned, we do want to support, we're Ohio, we're a farm state. We have a lot of local hemp farmers that are doing things right. They're getting their products tested. They're growing safe flower. They're doing all of the things that they should be doing, right, to provide a safe product for consumers. But that's one thing that all of us collectively as well, again, in our unified approach, is saying, hey, like, we have this commonality. We don't want the stuff in the vape shops. We're seeing too, it's making people sick. We don't have the testing. We don't have the data. We don't know. We have zero traceability with these products. And so I think it is just very important, us as an industry, to combat that while also supporting local farmers and these local shops that are doing it right. Because I talk to a lot of my colleagues on that side of the aisle as well, and they want the regulation. They want to be able to look, operate and be above board and have testing and have access. So it's a tough, delicate point. It's a delicate thing we're all trying to navigate right now.
Hey, Aaron, how about a basic business book of rights for everyone, not just this industry? So many injustices that I see all the time, and it all reflects more on the stigma and the federal prohibition since the early 20th century. Now you get, Aaron, go ahead. You get to plug your event next. Go ahead.
Well, no, I mean, that's right. I mean, I think also we need to start looking at this as a cannabinoid industry. This isn't cannabis and hemp industry. This is a plant that can be used for, all sorts of end uses, from, fiber to concrete up to, food and into drugs and up in pharmaceuticals even. So, but kind of the space that I think we occupy at NCIA and our members like BeneLeaves is in, consumable cannabinoids. And it doesn't matter, if those cannabinoids are derived from, what's technically qualified as hemp under federal law, or what's qualified as marijuana, we need to be treating it the same. And that means regulated, tested, labeled, age gate, put behind the age gate if it's an intoxicating product. And it sounds common sense, I think, for our industry, but it has been quite a challenge moving that forward in Congress. But I will happily, at your request, Jimmy, want to invite our listeners to join Emelie and myself for NCIA's first Ohio event of the year coming up just at the end of the month, June 26th in downtown Columbus. BeneLeaves and our other local member, Ice Miller, are generous enough to be hosting us for a cannabis industry leadership mixer. This will be a great opportunity to connect with the leaders in the industry there, and also plug into NCIA's work advocating for the interests of small businesses across the country. You can find out more about this event at our website, like everything else, thecannabisindustry.org, cannabisindustry.org/events, and register. It's free. We'd love to see you there.
Emelie, you add that to your list of things to do, is to host all these people and everything else you're doing, right?
No, it's great. We're really excited. We had a really awesome stakeholder event here as well back in the spring that had an amazing turnout. So we're super excited to host again. And, what we always say too, it's like that the more of us we can get in a room, the better, to learn from each other, to talk about pressure points. And it's always a very positive experience. So we're thrilled and we're looking forward to it.
Fantastic. And I hope everybody will look forward to future episodes of The Voice of Cannabis, the NCIA's Voice of Cannabis podcast. And it is, again, supported by our friends at Buds Group in the tri-state area of New York, New Jersey. And they're a consultant now across the country. So Buds Group can answer a lot of things for you if you want to get into this industry at any level. They've got a consultant for you. And of course, the PR team at Maverick Public Relations out of Denver, Colorado. So for Aaron Smith and for Emelie Ramach, I'm Jimmy Young. Thank you so much for listening. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.
We focus solely on the cannabis space. The cannabis is not just another item that we've put on our website and said, oh, we're in cannabis. We do cannabis and cannabis only, and we focus on cannabis day in and day out. So with Buds Group, we're going to not only work with you and give you advice, we're going to help see your project through to completion. And you're going to find at the end of the day, it'll be a fraction of a cost of working with a larger firm, because our executives are focused just on cannabis and we run lean.
Looking for PR that over-delivers on expectations? At Maverick Public Relations, they pair big agency experience with personalized attention. From launching award-winning brands to securing top-tier media hits, their data-driven communications team helps visionary leaders and entrepreneurs rise above the media noise. Maverick PR is responsive, collaborative, and relentless about results and ROI. Visit themaverickpr.com and make headlines together.
That's a wrap on this episode of the NCIA's Voice of Cannabis. If you liked what you heard, smash that like and subscribe button, follow us on your favorite platform, and share this episode with your network. We've got more industry movers, shakers, and game changers coming your way every week. So don't miss a beat. Tune in next time for another fresh episode with Aaron and Jimmy.